Okay, so I've been waiting for the last few components to arrive so we can do a full evaluation of this ST-1509 ATTEN soldering station. And what we have is we've got a 150 watt iron, 130 watt, a 50 watt, and we got these two different sizes of tweezers. They're both 100 watts, and I've got a bunch of different tips here. So in any case, let's have a look at the soldering station itself. We'll open it up and see what's in there. Okay, so first thing that we will notice is that this is based on a great big transformer over here. This why the station is so heavy, and I don't think there is a switch mode power supply in there, although there might be a few little buck converters in there too for the microcontrollers and what have you, which is actually good because a linear power supply will last a lot longer typically than a switch mode power supply, on account that the filtering capacitors, you know, the ESR doesn't matter that much and all that kind of stuff when they're aging. So this transformer has a 6 volt, 12 volt, 9 volt and 18 volt windings. Two separate windings on them, and this happens to be this says 5 amp 250 volts or 110 volts. Presumably it has both a 250 volt and 110 volt winding on it, I presume, for different markets. There's a little fan there to cool it up if it ever gets too hot. And over here, I don't really want to take the PCB out. I don't think there's much point to that. There is a dirty big MOSFET over here, which is connected to one of the pins on the socket there, and there is two smaller MOSFETs that are connected to two different more pins on the little socket over there. I am supposing that these two are used for the left and the right side of the tweezers, and it may be possible that the really big one here is used for the over there is used for the 150 watt iron, perhaps maybe the 130 watt one, and maybe the 50 watt iron might connect to one of those two smaller ones like the tweezers do, because I believe that the tweezers use the same output as the smaller soldering iron, one of them. And that's about, not much else to say about this. It's just that there is a microcontroller here, and you know, the usual little chips, op amps and things and what have you for the amplifying the thermocouple. And on this side over here, I'm not 100% sure what that is all about. I'm just going to move this over. There is 5 of these Schottky 30 amp double Schottky barrier diodes here on a big heatsink. So each one of those has 2 diodes with the cathodes connected together, and I'm not sure exactly how they're used. It's possible that there's multiple windings on here, that these are actually combined to make like bridge rectifiers or something, or well, if you got a center tap, you can use this two diodes each. I'm not sure, but that's what is in there. And there's not much really else to say about it. Of course, there's like a little ground connector that you can connect to your wrist strap that plugs into the back here with a little banana plug. And as far as the, looking inside of it, that's probably all that we can determine from that. It seems to be a rather, solid piece of equipment in that way, and not much else to say about it. So just a little recap here. This is the website of the company that makes this soldering station, www.atten.com. I'll put some links in the description. And so when I was researching this thing, I was pleased to find out that they have a website. It's in English, Spanish, Chinese, Russian, and German. And you can buy it with the 50 watt iron or the 130 watt iron or the 150 watt iron or the tweezers. So I actually bought the one with the tweezers, and it comes with a holder, but the tweezer one is different. It's like square, so I separately bought the holder for the soldering irons, and I bought each one of these soldering irons to try them out. But I'm starting to think that in normal use it would be recommended maybe to get the 130 watt iron, although if you do a lot of micro soldering like on cell phones, you might want this one as well, because it has the smallest tips available. Anyway, the stand, it has this contraption which we'll use later on to actually pull the tips out so you can change them over. It has all sorts of features. It has an auto standby and an auto sleep function that you can turn on and off and set for different time delays, which I really like, because if you're not using the soldering iron for a bit, like you're fiddling with something, after about, I think I got mine set to like 5 minutes, it'll go to a sleep function where it will decrease the temperature, or standby function rather, decreases the temperature 150 degrees C, and after another further time, I think I got it set for like maybe 10 minutes. I'm not sure, but I'd have to check what I set it for. It's programmable. It'll actually turn itself off. In any case, you can even password protect it so no one can change your settings. That might be important if you're working at a company where multiple people are using these stations. This company's quite amazing. They've got so many different products. They have different types of soldering stations, hot air stations, high power supplies, solder pots. These hot air stations I kind of like the looks of as well. They got flux, solder suckers, you name it. They seem to make and sell all those things. So some of the stuff that I bought, like all the spare tips and so on, and the extra stand, the soldering iron holder, I actually bought directly from ATTEN. I thought I would try them out. There is like a contact us section. I sent them an email, and I was quite pleased to find out that they have an overseas salesperson, lady that seems to understand and write English perfectly. So I didn't have the problems like some of those sellers on AliExpress they don't know any English, so it actually gets translated for them, and they don't understand what you're saying half the time, and I don't understand what they're saying either. But that didn't apply here, so that was quite a pleasant experience. However, most of it I actually bought from AliExpress. See, this is the station here with the tweezer. That's originally what I bought, and I wanted, that was my motivation for getting this thing. I wanted those, I saw those tweezers and I knew that that was going to work for me. That's exactly what I was looking for. So I decided, well, the price has already gone up, as I see. I think I paid $200 for the whole thing. Now it's $210. Anyway, for what it is, I think it is still good value on account that if you get a JBC or a Weller station of equal capability, you'd be paying $800 to over $1,000. And the soldering irons too. I bought the tips from ATTEN Direct, and they charged me $13 each. They cost a lot more on AliExpress, but then I did have to pay for DHL shipping, which was not insignificant. Any case, there is yet another store that sells these things. There are 3 different sizes of tweezers. This is the 0.51. That's I think the size of the tips, 0.5 millimeter or something, 1.3 millimeters, and 2.2. So I bought the 2.2s, and I've got the original that came with it, which is the 0.5. And then there is the soldering iron that you can. I bought these from here as well. 50 watts, 130 watts, and 150 watts. Okay, so also on here, if you go to products, oh, I guess I was already on that page, wasn't I? Is it under download? Product catalog, yeah. There's a user manual. Also, the user manual is in English, which was also pleasantly surprised. So they have a product catalog for all their products, and in there, one of the pages has a breakdown of all the tips you can get. This is, let me see now. Yeah, this is the 50 watt tips. There's apparently some 100 watt tips as well, but I don't know if they fit, which handle they fit in. Looks like it goes into the 50 watt one as well. Yeah, could be, maybe they used double power for the heater. Anyway, this is 130 watt tips that are available, and these are the different tips available for the 150 watt one. I didn't buy any extra tips for the 150 watt one. The one that came with it is probably sufficient, because I would only use the 150 watt one for we will get into that, you know, for when I need lots of power. Anyway, so that is that. So now let's have a look what features this thing has. Okay, so here we are. We've got the ATTEN workstation, soldering station here. So let's have a little overview of the features that it has. It's actually remarkably simple, which is really what I like. It came with a user manual in English, which is a nice change from most of the Chinese stuff. And it just has some information here about what the buttons do, how the display works, and what it is for, and all that kind of stuff, which we can go through. But as I said, it is remarkably simple. And all that, and it has a little page in the back here about way in the back about all the tips that are available, and there's some interesting ones there that I haven't even seen. Anyway, at the back there is a ground wire, so you can actually ground yourself. And if you have one of these wrist straps here, like that, if you can see it, then you can either hook it up like so and ground yourself when you're working on stuff. If you're worried about static or this particular wrist strap, I can actually unplug the crocodile clip and plug it straight in the back of the soldering station. To be honest, for many years I've been soldering and working with electronics and stuff, and I don't think I can remember even once when I actually zapped something. So I'm really usually not too worried about that. So I also have this T12 station here, which we're going to compare its operation against the ATTEN soldering station. This is one that I built from a kit. This one has a switch mode power supply in it. It can supply 24 volts up to 3 amps. Theoretically, that means that it can supply 72 watts. But as you will see when we actually start testing these things, these T12 tips come with a little caveat, if that's how you pronounce it. You see those tips only have two connections, plus 24 volts and 0 volts, or plus and minus if you like. And in order to read the temperature sensor that is included in this thing, they have to turn the heating off, read it, and there's a thermocouple in there or something like that, and there's an op amp on the little controller board which actually reads the signal coming back from it, and from there it can determine the actual voltage. But because while it is doing that there is a delay, and therefore you can't get the complete 72 watts on all the time. It goes on, read, and you will see that little light on this thing flickering. When we do the test, we're going to test the soldering irons, but this is a very wet little sponge here, and to make sure that it's really wet, I'm adding a bit more water to it. And you will see the voltage on the temperature on this thing drop. It just can't keep up because of that. So it's an interesting thing. We will do the same thing on this one, and we'll see how it behaves. Now, this soldering station comes with, I originally bought it because I wanted to get some hot tweezers, and I did a video on the tweezers, and they work really well. And these are the tweezers over here, and the tweezers, you can actually unplug the tweezers from there, and I bought some bigger tweezers to go in there so we can test those as well. And you can just plug it in like that. So we've got two sets. We've got the big ones and the small ones, I think, as I explained already previously. And these we got spare tips, and all of these tips, I got a bunch of them over here, and different sizes and shapes, some of which we will be testing. They come in nice little holders like that, and the soldering stations of course come with, this is sort of a holder for the tweezers. You get the tweezers over here, so they fit in there like so. And then there is a similar holder which I got for the soldering iron. And these ones here, this is actually metal. It's baked enamel metal. It looks like plastic, but this is metal. And there is two different sections here for unplugging the tweezers here. So like that, you can just pull them out. So when they're hot, you don't have to touch them, and then you can add, you know, a different tip in like that. Pretty easy. And the tips, of course, can be stored in the actual thing itself. This one here, the 130 watt and the 150 watt tips are very similar. They are like this. And I guess not dissimilar in some ways from the T12 tips. The kind of, this is a T12 one, this is the one for there. And let me see now, I'll put this one back. Yeah. Or is it this? Yeah, that's the one we want to put in. Okay, and if you're using the 50 watt iron, this is this one here, you can use, oh, let's move that for a sec. You can use this side over here and unplug it. See, it's a different kind of insert. Looks like that. Kind of like these, but like a similar to a stereo plug on the end of it. And of course we have, this is a 50 watt tip, and they slip into there as well. Now what we're going to be doing is we're going to comparing these this tip here to the one on the T12. So I've selected two tips that are roughly similar size and volume. They're slightly different, but they are similar, so we can compare apples with apples, sort of thing. That's the 50 watt one, and on the 30 watt one over here, same deal, similar. It's a little bit more chunky. Is it? Wait a minute. Is this? Yeah, it's a little bit of heavier, I guess, but the tip size is similar. So anyway, we're going to be testing the 130 watt one first. But first, let's turn this on, and we will go and see how quick it will heat up. Okay, if all things are equal, they should both be set to 300 volts, 300 degrees. So here goes. Boom, this one is already at temperature. This one is still thinking about it. It's getting close. That's about it. 298. These things tend to flip back and forth a little bit. The reason is, as I've already explained, that these tips only have two connections, and they've got to read the temperature and provide the heater with current through the same connection. So it can't, as you'll see that little light flickering when it's on it's actually heating, and when it's off it's reading. So it can't actually read all the time. This one can, and that's why it goes straight up and it stays there. Now, so that is why this thing may have a limitation, because even when it can supply 3 amps, it can't supply it all the time. It can only supply it while it is heating, and it has to read, so it has to switch off the heating occasionally. So probably I suspect that this thing is not actually producing 72 watts because of that limitation. This thing here can go up to 150 watts, and it's because it has all these extra pins on that plug there. It can read the temperature, sensing the temperature while it is heating, so that's why it is stable and it gets there very quickly. Now, what we have on the display here says real. That means that this is the real temperature, apparently. Anyway, there's a little bar chart here. This is 1 bar, which means I'm not soldering right now, so it is just enough current going in there to keep it at the temperature. When you start soldering or the tip cools down, you'll see this little bar chart going up. It goes up to 5 bars. If you're soldering using like the small soldering iron and you see the thing stays on 5 bars all the time, you know you got to get the bigger soldering iron or a bigger tip or something. This is the temperature that it's set to. You can change the set temperature with these 2 buttons here, up and down. If you want to store it, you can store up to 3 temperatures here. You will just hold one of these buttons down for like 3 seconds, and then it'll save the setting for you. If you want to go to the menu, you just hold these 2 buttons down, and you can lock it, and you can set a password, but we're not going to go there. You can select Celsius or Fahrenheit, and of course, you know, I'm always in Celsius. I don't even care about Fahrenheit. This is calibration. I got it set to 0, and the T12 station 2 is set to 0. So it times out if you don't do the setting. And I've set it for 5 minutes to go to standby mode, and 10 minutes to go to sleep mode. Standby mode, it goes to 150 degrees Celsius, and sleep, it turns off the heating altogether. But like the T12 handles, they have sensors in them. So as soon as you touch it and you take the sensor out of the soldering iron out of the stand, you will find that the temperature automatically goes back up again, which is the same as what this thing is doing. You see, I've got this, it's going to standby mode, so it's gone to 200 because I haven't touched it. Then if I don't touch it for another 5, or I can't remember what I got this one set for. If I let it set for another 5 minutes, it'll actually go to 0. And so they both have that feature, which is a really great feature. I like that, because you know, when you're soldering, sometimes you've got to adjust something or whatever you're doing, and it's not necessary for the iron to stay hot because these guys heat up so quick. Especially this one, it's just, you know, a few seconds. So that's how that works. All right, now let's bring in the other camera here. This is our temperature sensor. Turn it on. So let's take this one first, since it is at 300 degrees. Let's get some solder here. With a little bit of solder on the tip. So this is when we find out that at uncalibrated is actually 333 degrees. And now if I pick up this T12 tip, You see, it notices that I have picked it up. There is a vibration sensor in there, and it's already heating up. So while that's happening, I will this is the T12 one, and it is even hotter at 300 degrees, 346, 347. Now, what I do is I don't tend to fiddle much with the calibration on these things, because when I'm soldering, I pretty much notice, you know, I might set it to 300 degrees and or even 290 or something like that. And if the solder isn't melting nicely, I can turn the heat up a little bit. If I notice that it's, you know, you can feel it and see it when it's too hot, and I'll turn it down a little bit. So that's usually what I do. I'm not that fussy about the actual temperature, but nevertheless, we will have a look. Now this one here, what did we have? 332, right? There's the flat end of the tip. I must also say that I do not necessarily know how accurate this little temperature sensor device is either, on account that it cost me $15 on AliExpress, and it's a copy of a Hacko one. Okay, so what have we got? 324. So all things being equal, if we go into here and tell it to reduce the temperature by, was it 24 degrees? We might find that .306. Maybe we can add a few more. Let's do 26. Close enough. 301, 302, 30 whatever. So we made a slight adjustment there. But this is, I'm just going to turn this off for a sec. And this one too. Now we're going to change the tip to this one, and we're going to see what happens. And you will find that each one of these tips is slightly different. So the calibration is going to be out again. And I've tried the same thing. The T12 tips are the same. And I think if you are, you know, a professional engineer or whatever, I think you would probably have multiple stations, and then you can calibrate each one. If you really have to, you can calibrate each one to the actual iron or tweezers or whatever that you're using. But it, as I said, I'm not too particular about it. I will set the temperature, you know, to a medium value, 290, 300, and I'll start soldering, and then I will just keep track of how well it is, if I need to turn it up or down, and that usually works for me. That's pretty close. This one is recording 296 when it's set to 300. That's pretty close. It's not that much different from the other one. Okay. I'm gonna turn it off, and now we're going to put the 50-watt iron in there and see what it does. So now we're dealing with a completely different iron at a different, I think it even has its own power supply, because as I showed before, there is like 3 different MOSFETs in there feeding voltages to the socket over here. And so this is the small 50-watt iron. Now you see this one is only coming back with 257 degrees when it's set to 300. So the calibration on this one would have to be changed for this iron, but I would just set the temperature to 350 and call it quits. There you go. I just set it to 350. Now we got 305, and if I remember, you know, I would say that this is going to be the 50-watt iron, and that's the 130-watt iron. So that's how we deal with it. So you can see that there can be variations for different tips, different soldering irons. Anyway, so much for that. And I have verified the T12 version is exactly the same. It varies depending on the different tips that you plug in there and so on. Put that over here so it can cool down by itself. All right, now this can go off. So now we're going to turn these things back on. I want the 100 and, oh no, actually, you know what? Let's try, let's put this away. Let's try the 50-watt iron first, actually. For our next test, we're going to see how well it can maintain temperature. Okay, turn that on, turn this one on. Now, set this one back to 300. All right, so this is the T12, and keep an eye on the temperature there. Add a little bit more water to this sponge for good measure, because we're going to see how well, and you can see, watch the little LED on there and see how much it is heating. You see the temperature? It's gone right down to, like for a little bit there, for 190, 260, and it's heating most of the time, but it just occasionally it has to read the temperature, so it turns off. So the temperature has dropped, you know, a good 50 or even 60 odd degrees. Now we're going to try the same with this, and here you'll be able to watch that little bar graph there, see how high it goes up. Let's add a bit more water. Okay, so this one went way down and it came back with error 7. Somewhere in this little book should tell you what the error codes are. Short circuit of sensor. I think it is just, it just thought it was overloaded. So the 50 amp, the 50, I keep saying that the 50 watt one will drop down because of its limitation as well. But now let's try the 130 watt one. And to be honest, I have already determined that the 50 watt iron will be good just for use with the with very small components. You know, if you're doing tiny SMD components and things, little connectors on cell phones and things, it'll be good. But for everyday use, I would be planning to use this. Let me see which tip I've got in there. I need to change the tip. Oh, sorry. I keep knocking this camera here, which is not good. Okay. Let's turn this one off for now. Okay, so now let's try the 130 watt iron. Okay, on. Actually, I think it has 6 bars on that thing, doesn't it? You see that how it's going 4 bars, 3 bars, 4 bars, but it stays at 300 degrees. So this iron over here is easily able to keep, even while the water steam is coming off the sponge, it's easily able to maintain heat. And that's what we're looking for. The T12 one, sometimes I run into a limitation of how much heat it produces. Okay, so what we've learned is that this 130 watt iron, that's the one I'll be using for everyday use. And it can just, it really produces a nice amount of heat. It can maintain heat even on a soaking wet sponge. Boils off the water. The 50 watt one cannot, and the station actually shuts it down because it thinks that there is something wrong, and that got that error 07, which is actually a good thing. So if it doesn't overrun anything. Okay, so now I'm going to turn that off. I'm not going to bother to test the 150 watt iron because it's just going to be a more powerful version of the 130 watt one. It seems to be able to use the same soldering iron. So now let's actually go and try some actual soldering and see what we can find out. We're going to have a look at a few components on this PCB and see how well those. I've got the bigger tweezers loaded here, the new ones that I have, so I'm going to try those out and see. We've already tried the little ones. I'll put a link to the video in the description, as I said. Okay, so let's switch to the microscope. So I have this is the board from a distance, and now in the microscope, if I turn up the ring light, you'll get sort of a picture like that. Now let's have a look. We want those. Can we find, yeah, these four big diodes here. Now if I turn on these lights, suddenly we have, and turn down the top, the ring light, we have a much better view. Okay, I'm just going to try to pick these things off. I'm not even going to put flux on them to see how they will work. Normally you would put flux on there and some, maybe even some unleaded some leaded solder rod. Yeah, looks like it would be good to add some flux after all. Just experimenting here with these things and see what they can do and what they can't do. Yeah, see, you do need some flux on these things. There we go. And if you wanted to put them back, of course you would put some solder on there first. Now what about this I'm using, oh, camera's over there. I'm using this Amtech flux. It's a bit blurred, I guess. There we go. On those things, inductors, you would need to put some fresh solder on there, leaded solder, to like that. And then adding a tiny bit of flux would not hurt either. Yep, there we go. Okay. A little bit of leaded solder. A bit of flux. The other tweezers are a little bit easier. Yep, pretty easy to take off and easy to put back on. Alright, well, let's have a look at this other board here. First of all, there is a great big, what is it, 100 volt, 100 microfarad capacitor on there. This is in the way. It is this one over here. Okay. Yeah, that's better. Yeah, there we go. Pretty easy. And now we can get through some of those components here. Okay, so this is our so-called problem board. It's really hard to get stuff off. It's a multi-layer board with lots of ground planes on it, and I found some components over here that are obviously connected to a ground plane, because my T12 rather tips were hardly able to solder, put some leaded solder on there. Now you notice that these components here, they don't have much of an overhang at all. The pads are all kind of underneath, and it makes them really hard to remove. Now I have, and we've got some inductors here and another inductor here. We're going to try to get off, and I have put a little bit of solder and flux on some of these components here. We'll see how we go with those. Those were absolutely unable to be removed with the cheap tweezers that I have tried in the past. Let's have a look. Let's see if we can get these. See if I have to turn the heat up or something on this one. You see, it's really difficult to remove those, but they do eventually give with these 100-watt tweezers. This is some big diode, I think. Okay, here we did eventually get that one off. You see, that's the difference with these with good tweezers. They do come off, even though this is a... Where are we on this board? It's really hard to to find a location where I'm at. Okay, there we are. Okay. Now we're going to try see if I can adjust this microscope. Just hold on. Okay, that's a bit better. It was a little bit too close. Now we can... I want to try to remove this big inductor. Yep, no problems either. And it was quite a narrow spot between that MOSFET over here and that inductor. So our problem board is no problem, no problemo. Ow, that thing was hot. Let's try this inductor here. Yep, that was easy going as well. And I guess you can solder it back on pretty easy too. Just hold it down like that and it's back. Okay, so I think we have proven that these tweezers work pretty good on this board here, which is a an example. Oh, I wonder if I can get that fuse off too. Yep, I think that is... Oh, you know what? This is going to be interesting. I previously tried to remove some strange little components here. You see that all got ruined with the other tweezers there. I'm wondering if these tweezers can remove that without damaging it. If we can do those, then we are pretty happy about it. Oops. Butterfingers. Okay. Yes, sir. Just goes to show you, when you have the right tools, you can do stuff and not ruin things. Let's have a look if we can solder a cent to this printed circuit board. this is the no problems soldering a cent coin on with that. Let's try the T12 one. Put some solder on there. For some reason it looks black under the light, but it is actually brown. How about if I turn this light up? Okay. The ATTEN soldering iron certainly was able to do it. I have it on the T12 one, and it is, the temperature is going down 299, 298, and the iron is actually set for, let's give it a bit more heat then. Let's put a bit more solder on there. Let's put a bit of solder on the top, that might help. I'm giving it all the help I can get, even some flux. I think it's finally starting to melt. It's having a hard time of it. It did finally. There's a lot of corrosion on there. It did finally melt after holding it on there for a long time. Did you see how it is? It's having a really hard time melting the solder, the T12. But when I use the ATTEN one, of course, you know, it's got almost double the power. Yeah, you see it's well able to do it much better. If only it would stay under the microscope. So that's the point why I got this soldering station, and because I came across times like that when the T12 station just did not have enough heat for this heavy duty stuff. But as I said, 98% of the time it is just fine. Okay, this would be a good example of using a 150 watt of soldering iron. This is a AWG10 wire, and this is an 8mm connector which goes into the spot welding machine. So let's add a little bit of flux here. And this is the 150 watt soldering iron, so we'll see how that goes. I just want to get this side done. Yeah, easy, man. If I would use my T12 or a lesser soldering iron, that would have taken a lot longer. You'd have to heat it up and heat it up until finally it would melt. But with the 150 watt iron there, it is going very well. Okay, now the other side. Flux. I should really have some thicker solder here, but this is all I've got. So it's going to take a bit of solder because it's wicking it up, you know. I think we're getting there. Yeah. Check the other side again. I think that's it. Okay. Where's my here? Just clean it up with some isopropyl alcohol. All right. Now we can put some hot shrink tubing around there for good measure. Okay, as a summary then, I really do like this ATTEN soldering station, and I'm glad I bought it. It suits my purposes. It seems to be good quality. And of course I've got the tweezers that I really appreciate, but this is the real reason I bought it originally. But when I got the tweezers, I really liked those, and I thought, well, you know, maybe those soldering irons are pretty good too. So I got those, and the 130 watt and 150 watt irons I really like. They are something that I didn't have, and now I can solder some heavy duty stuff, which is a good thing. The 50 watt iron, as you can see, I have two of these T12 stations here, which I use. I like those as well, but they are a little bit limited as to the power at times. Not often, you know, 98% of the times they are just fine. But there are just a few instances when I have to solder something on a heavy duty ground plane, or as you saw, when there's heat sinks involved and so on, they can be a little bit slow and not be quite powerful enough for my purposes. And the 130 watt soldering iron seems to be plenty powerful enough, and for the 150 watts is even better, of course. The 50 watt iron, if you got multiple stations like these, I wouldn't buy. It is limited in power, and most of the time, you can use the 130 watt one, and they sell the same tips sizes. You can get the small tips for the 130 watt one as well. You just have that extra power available, and that seems to be a better proposition to me. But anyway, I think that this is a welcome addition to my lab. Of course, you still need a hot air station. You can't do everything with soldering irons nowadays. Removing chips and certain items are just so much easier with hot air. So I've got one of those as well, and so I'm pretty well equipped now. Anyway, I'm sorry that the video got a bit long, but I was thinking maybe I should cut some of it out. But then on the other hand, I thought you might appreciate some of the stuff that I've got in there, so you can always fast forward it or bypass some of it. If you like it, please subscribe and like and all that sort of stuff, and I will see you guys later. I've got some more projects coming up, and we will get into those. Okay, see you later. Bye bye.